tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 571 for February 5th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, for this conversation, for this show this week.
Yeah.
I hope everyone had a great week last week. However, this show is going to be, it's going to be a little jarring. I'm not going to lie.
Competitive. Yeah.
It's going to be a little weird because in the back half of the show, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're continuing the Oscars theme, specifically talking about previous Best Picture winners. We're going to have a draft.
There's nothing else to talk about, so this will be fun.
Exactly. We're going to be drafting our favorite Best Picture winners. So we're just talking about Best Picture, the winners. And we'll do a draft. We've talked about our top three, I believe it was at the time, our top three Best Picture winners on the old format.
I forget what episode number that was, but you and I did do a top three favorite Best Picture winners, so that's available there. And some of those I'm sure will be referenced once again. But it's certainly fun, given the amount of great Best Picture winners we've had over the decades. Yeah. To turn this into a competition between you and I, because these drafts that we sometimes do are a lot of fun. They really do.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. I'm very curious to see where it goes because there's so many great films to choose from. Obviously, that draft could go
and not so great ones. I doubt any one of us will have Crash. So if anyone's thinking we're going to pick that, that's not going to be the case.
Maybe an honorable mention. Who knows? Maybe not.
I don't even think it's warranted that kind of praise.
Yeah, so we'll get to that. We'll have fun with that in the back half of the show. However, we are beginning the show in a much more saddening way.
Yeah.
And, there's really no other way to, I guess, set this up other than to just say that this last week was heartbreaking. For several reasons. One, we had the passing of Carl Weathers.
Yeah.
Last Thursday, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm. At 76 years old.
Yep, at the age of 76. What a career, man. Coming from the world of football into acting, what he did with the Rocky franchise is legendary. But even beyond that, some of the work he did with Sandler obviously comes to mind. In recent years, what he did with Star Wars was genuinely awesome as well.
He was kind of on the verge of a comeback, especially given his role in The Mandalorian, right?
Which he won a Primetime Emmy for.
Exactly. Yeah, he was gearing for a really big comeback. We've even been seeing him pop up in commercials with Gronkowski, right? We've been seeing a lot of that stuff. Yeah. So he's sadly going to be very missed. Yeah. What a great presence. And I think what's so fascinating about his career, because you look at his acting career specifically. I know you mentioned that he came from the world of football, but you look at his acting career specifically, and he has ventured all over the place. He's done a lot of television work. He's done a lot of strange action films. Admittedly, I haven't seen all of them. But you think of the iconic legacy he has left with Apollo Creed, his performance in Predator, Chubbs from Happy Gilmore. Yeah. That's three properties right there. And they have such a strong legacy. And the fact that he was able to create that kind of blueprint for such a small sliver of content is really incredible.
It's insane. Yeah, no, it's incredible how memorable he is on screen.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom he wasn't in more. I mean, it is incredible because, what can you say about Apollo Creed? I mean, he was phenomenal as that character. Sylvester Stallone, I think, articulated it very well in that video he made when the news was dropped. And that not only did he have this charisma to him, he had this on-screen presence that was undeniable, but he was an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
And he very much looked the part on screen. Like that athleticism, I think really it's palpable in those movies. And there is a lot of movement. I mean, that's the thing about Rocky and maybe boxing movies at large. That is like the movement I think comes through
it's
maybe
the agility
more so than a lot of other sports movies. And I mean, he was able to channel all of that seamlessly.
Yeah. But he was still a great performer as far as doing what an actor needs to do to get the work done. And I think about him as Apollo Creed, and a lot of that legacy is also attributed to the fact that we have these Creed movies now. So Apollo Creed is as a character is all over this franchise. So we're automatically going to be thinking of Carl Weathers whenever we think of Rocky, right? But I think about Carl Weathers and what he brought to those movies, and I especially go back to Rocky III, which I think is the best of any of the sequels. I think that is a very underrated film. And I think of the camaraderie that he and Stallone have, especially in that back half. Carl Weathers is genuinely great in that movie. And I think he's genuinely great in all of them, but that one especially is a truly inspiring performance. And I love what he brings to that one especially, and I just wanted to call that out.
I agree. No, I think he's fantastic in that film. I love him in all of those movies, really.
Yeah.
Or I believe earlier you mentioned Predator, and he's one of the most memorable elements of that. Maybe it's because of the elements of that film that's been so memeified today. He's certainly such a big part of that. But even in the film itself, I think he leaves an imprint.
Well, sometimes I secretly think, or at least I secretly wish he was the star of that movie and not Schwarzenegger. I understand why that movie came out at that time. It was, they were banking on Schwarzenegger as this big new action star. I totally get it. And I think he's fun in the movie, but there's something about Carl Weathers and his presence there that no one could do. No one could do that.
Yeah, I agree. And what's so interesting about, so Predator is this big action movie. Rocky, big sports action movie. And then you get something like Happy Gilmore, which is sports, but his character is completely antithetical to all of that. and to your point, it's like, yes, he has this physicality to him that works for those movies. He doesn't need any of that for Happy Gilmore. It all comes through in his comedic timing and his performance. That's his charisma. That's what makes him so incredible in that film. Is just his
a great point.
Acting prowess.
That's a great point, and I think something we don't often associate Carl Weathers with is his comedic chops, his comedic timing, and not just with Happy Gilmore. Carl Weathers is really funny in Predator. He's really funny in the Rocky movies at times too, and in sort of an arrogant way. But he is still very funny. He has a great sense of humor, and he was able to dial that to 11 in Happy Gilmore in a way that any other actor may not have made that work. They probably could have overdid it. But there's something about the way Carl Weathers balances it that it just kind of works. And Happy Gilmore, it's not my favorite Adam Sandler movie, admittedly, but he's one of my favorite characters from an Adam Sandler movie, specifically like in the Happy Madison kind of echelon, like those kind of movies. Chubbs is easily one of my favorite characters from those.
I completely agree. Absolutely love it. Yeah. One of the better supporting characters to come out of Sandler's
actually might be the best, honestly.
It's certainly one of the most memorable. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But even in The Mandalorian, like his on-screen presence there, it's the same thing as everything we've been talking about. There's a little bit of a physicality to it, but more so it's, again, his comedic timing. He's quite funny. He has these, biting one-liners that I think are really great. And he just seamlessly fits into that world so well. And the other thing too about The Mandalorian, it's not just his on-screen presence, but he directed several of those episodes as well.
That's true. Yeah.
Which were very good. So he also served well as a director for that universe.
Good point. That's a great point.
And his character was quite significant to The Mandalorian. I don't know what they're going to do when it comes to this film they're supposed to be making with that universe. Yeah. They're going to have to change some things now, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how they're going to work around that because he was kind of a big part of it, but Either way,
Yeah. It also
great
makes me
actor. He'll
it
be
also
missed,
makes
for
me
sure.
wonder what they're going to do about Creed 4. And that's not
Yeah.
that's not to think that Carl Weathers was going to appear in that movie in some way. That's beside the point because he probably wasn't.
No.
But what is Michael B. Jordan going to do as a tribute to that legacy, to that character's legacy? There's a new fuel to that creative fire now, and I'm curious how they're going to handle that.
Well, and that's another thing, right? The Creed films only exist because Carl Weathers made that character what it was.
Exactly.
If it was a nothing character or maybe just a one-time appearance and it was great and serviceable for, that film, I don't know if we get the spin-off movies.
I don't know.
It's that might be a little myopic to say. It's hard to say. But not only do you get him in Rocky 2, but to your point earlier, Rocky 3 and how great he is there in that film.
Oh, man.
That you get this iconic character from that franchise that has become beloved. A lot of people love that franchise. Maybe not all the films, but most of them.
Most of them. In fact, even the ones that aren't that great, I still have a soft spot for. I think sure. Rocky 4. I think Rocky 4 is the greatest MTV music video of all time.
Yeah, so people love Apollo Creed. I mean, it's titled after Rocky, but what's the second character that comes to mind for most people?
It's Apollo.
It's going to be Apollo Creed, and for them to spin off this new series of films based off it, that only comes because of Carl Weathers and what he brings to that character.
Absolutely. So, yeah, he's going to be missed. He's going to be very missed.
Going to be very missed for sure. But continuing this trend of mourning, I also wanted to bring up Philip Seymour Hoffman because there was a lot of talk about him over the weekend as well. Because this last Friday, February 2nd, was 10 years since we lost Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah.
Hard to believe. 10
I can't believe it has been that long. Jeez.
And I know I've made this sentiment many a times on social media. I saw it again a few other times as well. But that is the actor death that has stung the most for me. And it continues to sting like it happened yesterday. I don't think I'll ever get over his passing.
I think it comes down to two reasons as to why you feel that way and why I think many of us feel that way. And I echo what you're saying there. First off, his death was so surprising and tragic that like no one saw that coming, sadly. And he was on the verge, not even on the verge. He was basically there, but he had nowhere to go but up to essentially become our greatest living actor. Like he was getting to the point of being like Daniel Day-Lewis level.
Yeah.
And I think that's where his loss hurts the most because it's been 10 years since his passing. And just 2 years before his passing, we got to see what is one of his career best performances in The Master, right?
Yeah.
So like coming off the heels of that and just seeing the kind of range that he had, like you always want to see where he was going to go next. Because you don't get an actor who's able to do something like The Master, and only a few years before that do Along Came Polly, right? No, like that should be illegal. That should be illegal. Like no actor should be allowed to do that, let alone so successfully.
It is,
and that's the thing.
It is unfair how incredible he was in his comedic timing as a comedian on screen. Incredibly memorable. That's certainly one of them. It's also funny. I was just talking about this with my wife right before we started recording because they teased earlier, some news outlet, I can't remember what it was, Variety maybe, that one of the expected ads at this year's Super Bowl is
Twisters, right?
Is the Twisters trailer. And you think about his little role in Twister, and that's one of the most memorable things about that film. He is so funny.
the wonder of nature, baby. That was my first time ever seeing Philip Seymour Hoffman in a movie. So
I think it was for me too.
Yeah, I was at a certain age when Twister was all the rage in 1996 when that came out.
Yeah.
So of course I wanted to see it at my 6 or 7-year-old age. Like that was the cool movie to see. And even at that age, Dusty was my favorite character. Far and away my favorite character. What was the recent news about it? That I think the costume designer from that movie talked about how Philip Seymour Hoffman just came and is like, "Oh, this outfit, that's my character. I'm just taking this outfit." And he decided to dress himself as Dusty. So in a way, he kind of helped visualize the character. That is on brand. So on brand.
It's just incredible how funny he was. Like, it's just unfair to be that funny, but also have the maturity and the talent to do something like, as you noted, The Master, or to fall into, the persona of someone as eloquently as he does in Capote, or to give us the existentialism that we see in Synecdoche, New York. Like, everything he did was just utter gold.
Mm-hmm.
It was perfection. And then I know this is debatable and people don't agree. I think he also gives us the best villain of the Mission Impossible franchise as Owen.
Certainly the best performance from a villain, I would say that.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Like, I just love the range of him, and it's unfair the quality, the prowess of him in each one of these aspects. Elite comedian, elite drama actor, can portray a person to perfection. He shouldn't be able to do that.
It's funny you bring up Mission Impossible, because sometimes I think Philip Seymour Hoffman was just this person like wearing the same mask, but it was like 17 different people or something like that, just wearing the same mask. 'Cause there's no way these were the same people in all of these movies. It's hard to believe that is the same actor. When we talk about actors having a certain range, that's where Philip Seymour Hoffman needs to be in the conversation as being one of the greatest of all time. And that's why his loss hurts. That's why, because I was always looking forward to what new things he was going to do and where he was going to surprise us next.
I completely agree. And I think that's what I love so much. And I tweeted this out over the weekend as well. I know it wasn't that well regarded of a movie. I don't think it was not successful at the box office, but the last film we got
A Most Wanted Man, was that what it was called?
Most Wanted Man. And, it's this political thriller. It's very methodical and slow, and people will mostly find it mundane. I like the film, but what's most memorable to me about it is how it ends. This is like right off the heels of his death, right? So he dies in early February in 2014. This film comes out just a few months later. Yeah. March, April, May, maybe. And it's the last role we get of him. And the film ends by him getting into a car, and the camera is in the back seat. So we are there just watching him drive around in this car, and the camera's stationary. Like, we're just sitting in the back seat on this ride with him as he drives us through the streets of New York or wherever he is. And he gets he stops the car. He gets out of the car, and the camera doesn't move. It stays in the back seat. So it's like we are in the car with him. We are the camera. We're just sitting there, and he stops the car unexpectedly. We don't know what's happening. He gets out of the car, and he just walks away. To leave us forever. And there's something about that image. That's the last image we get of Philip Seymour Hoffman that I just think is so incredibly melancholic.
Oh, it's like a moment of goodbye that we never got a chance to have.
Exactly.
It almost feels deliberate, which is a weird thing to say, because it clearly wasn't, but it almost does. The timing of that is just it's so bizarre. It really is.
Yeah, it's absolutely devastating. That's how it is. It's the fact that I think you articulated it well. The fact that we didn't get to say goodbye. He doesn't turn around to say goodbye. He just leaves us forever. Just walks away.
Yeah.
And there's something so devastating about it to me.
Yeah.
It crushes me.
I'm looking at his IMDb profile right now, and it's a great actor when you have at least 20 films that could rank as his best performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
and that's
insane.
not really hyperbolic. Like that's
Yeah.
if you want to say his best performance is Synecdoche, New York, okay, I'm not going to push back on that. If you say his best performance is Doubt, okay, I'm probably not going to push back on that. You say you like Mission Impossible 3 is his best performance, I'm probably not going to push back on that. You say Along Came Polly, I am not going to push back on that. It's like
he's really great in that.
I
Or
could keep
Before
going
the
on.
Devil Knows You're Dead.
Underrated performance, underrated
yes.
movie, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Heck, like 25th Hour, the Spike Lee joint.
Yeah.
He another very different type of role for him. But he's so good in that as well.
Yeah. I mean, he just, Lester Bangs is
Almost famous. I was just gonna say almost famous.
Like, I mean, come on. I mean,
well, I also feel like his performance in Punch Drunk Love is starting to get a little bit memeified, right? The whole shut up. Yeah,
it's so good. Oh my God, he's just such a great actor.
This he knew how to time comedic dialogue. It takes one thing to have good comedic timing, but it's also about how you time, and it's almost like you're editing yourself in the moment as an actor, right?
Yeah.
Like that whole shut up moment from Punch Drunk Love, and then how it ends, like, are you threatening me? He goes, yes. He's like, oh, that wasn't good. You're dead. It's just like it's a simple throwaway line, and yet somehow it feels iconic and necessary.
I know. You think about how many roles of his that we're never going to get a chance to see. I mean, I truly agree. I agree. I truly believe he could have ended up being one of, if not the best, that we have of the last 20 years for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll end it on this, and then we can transition to the draft. I say A Most Wanted Man was the last time we saw him on screen. That's not technically true. It was the last film of his
that he shot, right?
That he shot, and where he has a significant role in the film.
Right.
In 2015, he was in Mockingjay Part 2. Of course, they had to edit that in a weird sense because he didn't get to finish the filming of that.
Mm-hmm.
But he is in the film, and I'll remember this as long as I live. So I go to see that film by myself because, kid and all. And and so I go, it's opening weekend, and it's a packed theater in Lexington, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I am in a row, it's me, and then it's, I don't know. And I'm not exaggerating. I think I was the only guy in the role. It was me and a bunch of like 18-year-old girls, just a bunch of young women around me. And so it was a little awkward. Just like, I feel like I should switch seats with somebody. Like I took one of their friends' spot is what it felt like.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little strange. But then it becomes even stranger because, the film goes, and it's, of course, this is a film tailored for a younger audience. I get it.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I'm in the theater. We're watching the film, and the first time he comes on the screen, I immediately started to unravel. I lost it.
Had a minor panic attack in the middle of the theater.
Well, a little bit, and again, it's just a little weird because like, there's all these, these young people around me who probably don't know, sadly, who Philip Seymour Hoffman is.
Yeah.
And they probably don't know that he had recently passed away within the last year. And so they have no context as to what's happening. But the two sitting next to me, especially, there's no way they didn't know. I mean, I am uncontrollably sobbing. Like I'm full on. I mean, there's no way they didn't know. They knew. They knew very
something
aware
was up.
of what was happening in my little space here.
It's like, does he know that guy?
It kind of had that vibe to it a little bit. Thankfully they didn't say anything or make it more weird than it already was.
Yeah, that's good.
But it's a memory that sticks in my mind because it was this funny situation. I'm stuck in a row I should not have been in. And, and then I see his face come on screen for the first time since A Most Wanted Me, and in a significant way since his passing. And I couldn't keep it together. I couldn't.
That says a lot about you, JD, but it also says a lot about the man, Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yes.
Right. If anything, that's really
the
where
love
it comes
that we have for him.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm just an emotional person, so it's it happens. But
that's why it also says something about you. So
exactly.
We can't ignore that little fact.
But I miss him. Like I loved him so much. Gosh. Still miss him.
I really would have loved to see, like, that's a what if episode I would love to see, is the kind of roles he would have had if he hadn't had passed away.
Yeah. I know. Crazy. 10 years. Hard to believe.
Yeah. One of the greats, if not the great. Like I think of our generation, it's Daniel Day-Lewis and Philip Seymour Hoffman. I feel like those are the two I normally go to.
All right, Brennan, let's talk about coffee. It's my favorite.
Oh, you think we were part of some kind of cult or something like that, right?
Yeah, you would think that is the case because we are a part of the coffee cult.
That is true.
We do thank them for their support. So what's great about Coffee Cult is they source specialty grade coffee. If you don't know what that is, specialty grade coffee makes up for about 10 to 15% of the world's coffee production. We're talking about gourmet coffee, the elite of the elite. This is not something you'll find in store shelves often. You don't find them just, they're not easily readable at your local grocery store.
No,
because this is handcrafted gourmet
carefully
coffee,
sourced,
ethically sourced for sure.
Yeah.
And Coffee Cult takes it a step further because specialty grade coffee, it's this pristine green bean that is then roasted. However, when you get a bag of specialty grade coffee, not all of them are pristine. Some of them have these defects.
Yeah.
They're not all perfect. And most companies, they just roast that. That's part of having specialty grade. But Coffee Cult goes a step further. They remove all those defects. They only take those pristine green coffee beans, and that's what they roast. So the quality is very objectively the best that you can get around the world. And then they have a roasting process that makes it all the better. And as a result, the coffees they produce, you don't really need to add anything to them. The reason you want to add milk and sugar and all that nonsense to other coffees is because it's not great.
You're basically making it's caffeinated milk. It's caffeinated. It's just caffeinated.
It brings the caffeine, but a lot of those coffees are either very bitter or they're too acidic, or they just can't find that balance. And
don't you love when a natural coffee bean actually evokes the taste of where it came from and what it's meant to evoke?
Man, it's crazy. Like the Ethiopian harar is, and I'm not exaggerating, you drink it and it's like drinking liquid blueberry muffins. It is
that sounds impossible.
It does, but it like the notes of blueberry and strawberry and fruit are so pungent and in your face, and it's delicious. It's exquisite. It's really fantastic. If you want something that's more nutty and chocolatey, they have those as well, such as the Sumatra, which is really fantastic.
It's one of my favorites. I'm the bourbon guy. The bourbon blend is one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, there's just so many great flavors, and it's all organic. Like they don't even like the bourbon one isn't infused with like a chemical bourbon flavor. No.
Oh no, it's aged properly.
It's aged in authentic barrels, and it's just really fantastic. So you stay away from the chemicals, stay away from the manufactured nonsense. That's why you want to go check out Coffee Cult. They also roast to order, so your coffee is not just sitting around in some warehouse. It is fresh every single time. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, that code is ISF. You'll get 15% off your order at coffeecult.com. All right, we got to talk about podcasts. You do them, you love them, we listen to them. They're the best.
They are. And you need a good host. You need a good way to house a good podcast so people will actually listen to it and know what you're doing.
Exactly. If you want to start your podcast, it's one of the things you have to think about is, where is your podcast going to live?
Yep.
And we ended up choosing Libsyn. We've been with Libsyn since the beginning. Recently we just celebrated 11 years of doing this show.
Yeah.
11.
So it should be telling that we haven't left our home in that whole time.
Yeah. And Libsyn has been great. They've been awesome to us.
Yeah.
This entire time. And they host over 75,000 podcasts worldwide. They're a combination of liberated and syndication. Now they have all the tools you need to get your podcast up and running, to get it on Apple Podcasts, to get it on Spotify, wherever you want your podcast to be, they can make that happen. They give you all the analytics you need, optimization, RSS compliancy, anything in between. They will make that happen for you. And also, we've mentioned this before, their customer service, top notch. Truly, it's great.
And you've had experience.
I've had experience
plenty of experiences talking with them, and you've actually had a good time talking with them.
Man, it's really hard to find good customer service these days. Really, really hard.
It's unfortunate, but yeah, it's true.
I'm not throwing them under the bus just because, but recently we bought something for Sam for Christmas.
Yeah.
It was a PlayStation product. And their customer service barely exists, if at all. We have something that needs to be fixed or replaced. I can't find anybody to do it. It's been a nightmare, to be honest.
That's the thing, yeah. Because
if you're listening to this and can help me, please reach out.
You're probably
genuinely.
Yeah, you're probably too busy being directed at the distributor who sold it to you in the first place. And that's unfortunate.
It's hard to know. You're not really talking to real people, and the people you are talking to, it's just hard. They're so big, and they probably outsource their service anyway. It's hard. What's great about Libsyn is you're going to talk to people that know the service very well. They will help you with whatever your problem is or whatever your question is. They will get the answer to you quickly. You're going to talk to a real person. That's been my experience anyway, and it's just been lovely. They're super nice people. I cannot recommend them enough.
Yeah.
Again, that's Libsyn, Libsyn. And if you go to libsyn.com, again, that's libsyn.com. If you sign up today using our code, which is ISF, our code ISF, sign up today, you'll get 2 months for free. I mean, that's great. I mean, you could try it out.
Yeah.
2 months, see how your podcast works.
Yeah, that's a lot to get done for your podcast. 2 months is a great stretch of time. And we trust that Libsyn will be your place of hosting. We trust that Libsyn will be the place for you to go, but that is a great deal. You got to take up on that if you have a great podcast idea that needs to be built from the ground up.
Exactly. What Brendan said. Couldn't have said it better myself. Libsyn, Libsyn.com. Again, that code is ISF, and you'll get 2 months for free. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and transition to our best picture draft.
All right.
So we're going to do this like we've done with previous drafts. Brendan and I, we're going to snake draft this. We'll do 10 selections, and we'll see who comes up with the best 10.
And how do we want to have a criteria discussion as far as because you mentioned favorites early on, but do we want to actually post this on our social media and have people vote? Because if that is the case, we should probably look at it less so on favorites and more so on like trying to create like try and make a game out of it, right?
Yeah, I think that's more fun to do it more, to have some gamesmanship here.
Yeah.
Because like if we're just drafting our favorites, then yeah, I think we'll end up with two very different lists. That
and it's less fun if I don't whine for you taking a movie I had next on my list, right?
exactly, exactly. Yeah, so we want to get the vote.
Yeah,
so I
that's the whole
think that
point.
does make it more fun. It adds some stakes to this a little bit. And it forces us to have to think about this a little bit more beyond just our subjective taste, which I think is an added element that's great here. So
yeah,
so what we're gonna do for those that are new to this, so we're gonna do a draft, best picture winners, and we will take our 10, whatever that is at the end of this, we will throw that out on our social medias. And we will ask you to vote on who had the best 10. So
and
we
I think
have to think about that.
The 2 times we've done this draft thus far, because we've done 2 of these drafts on this new format, if I'm not mistaken. I think both times you just beat me by a hair. Maybe it wasn't even a hair. They were both pretty close, but you were definitely the victor in both of them. So I'm coming in with a vengeance. I'll just simply say that.
Okay, we'll see how he does. So I've never tried this before, but I do have, for those watching on YouTube, I have our little coin thing because I've talked about it before.
Oh, you want to prove that you're actually doing this?
I want to prove that I'm not fixing this. Okay.
I trusted you, but okay, so, maybe in case our listeners are, there it is.
If you're watching on the YouTube. All right, so here is the coin flip. Okay, so do you want to call it out, Brendan? Heads or tails?
I'll call it out. Okay, I'm going to call heads. Yeah, for some reason, I'm feeling heads. I've called tails each time, but I'm going to call heads.
All right, so he's going to call heads. Here we go. And it is heads.
It is.
So there it is.
Feeling it. Okay, I was feeling lucky.
Visual proof that I did not make it up.
It's going to be pretty awkward for our podcast listeners who are not on YouTube right now.
Yeah, you'll just have to go to YouTube to watch it. But if you're listening on the podcast, I just pulled up a video on the screen so you could see the coin flip go there. So
yeah.
All right, so Brendan won the coin toss, so he will go first. As I noted, we will snake this.
Yeah,
as we've done the last few times. So Brendan, the first overall pick is yours, my friend. Where are you going?
Oh, Godfather. I'm going with The Godfather.
The Godfather. Oh my God, what a shock. Okay.
Of course, you have to pick The Godfather if you're first in this, right? I feel like you kind of need to. Whether it's the quote-unquote objective pick that's going to get me more votes or not is kind of beside the point. It's also just one of my favorites in this kind of category. I think it's a perfect movie. I think it's a damn near perfect, not even damn near. I do think it is a perfect movie. It's honestly insane how someone can make this, Francis Ford Coppola, so early in his career, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. We did a podcast movie series when COVID hit because we had really nothing else to talk about. So we just randomly thought, let's do a Godfather movie series, which then led to our notorious and often hated conversation on Godfather Part 2. But I think it was Ryan and I that talked about The Godfather because you sadly couldn't make that episode, Judy, but you did give some lengthy thoughts introducing your thoughts on Godfather Part 2 in the next episode.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about how this is kind of a crime movie in disguise. In fact, it's really more of a movie about a deteriorating familial legacy in many ways. As a movie about fatherhood, as a movie about what it means to take that legacy and do something different with it, in some cases tarnishing it. It's a very powerful and relatable story that just happens to have this specific segment of the crime world depicting it. And I love the universality of that. It's a perfectly crafted masterpiece.
And I agree. The Godfather is a masterpiece. Obviously would have been my first pick here.
I know.
If it was
I should have went with something different just to shock you, but of course, this is a game after all.
It is a game. And because it's a game, for my first pick, I'm going to go with the movie that I don't love quite as much, but I do think, broadly speaking, is as beloved as The Godfather, and in some circles, more beloved as The Godfather, because that is The Godfather Part 2.
Feels weird taking it when we both don't love it.
No, I don't. I don't love it. I think the first Godfather is a masterpiece for all the reasons that Brendan noted there. I sadly don't love The Godfather 2 as much as a lot of people do. I think the film loses itself at times throughout that film. And as much as I appreciate the craft, the performances are all really great. And it's a film I overall do like.
Same here. Yeah, we don't dislike it. We should be clear about that.
Yeah.
In fact, in some ways, I think as an epic, as a directorial achievement, in many ways it is sometimes better than the first film. As far as just the sheer scope of it, I think is certainly something we have to commend, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's so much to really appreciate about The Godfather 2. And in some ways I understand why people might rank it above the first film. I just find it a little bit more messy, a little bit more disjointed, and I was underwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
But you and I are probably in a minority when it comes to that film.
I mean, I understand why it's a great movie, especially when it came out, because just 1974, the scope and the sheer like bigness of this movie was kind of unprecedented.
Yeah. And the flashback scenes I do think are immaculate, to be fair.
I think
the Vito stuff is awesome.
I think this is one of the greatest prequels ever made. I don't think it's one of the best sequels ever made, because it's kind of functioning as both. But a lot of the Michael Corleone stuff, I feel like, is kind of, as far as his arc, it's kind of repetitive to the way that we saw his arc conclude in the first film. I just don't feel like it goes anywhere for me. And if it does, it feels like it's kind of repetitive of certain things that the first 20 minutes of part 2 kind of give us. But all of the stuff with Robert De Niro, I think, is amazing. And I love his restrained performance.
Yeah, I completely and utterly agree. And I think the irony is that the Michael stuff might be the most iconic when it comes to this movie. I feel like at least the images that are proposed the most when this film is brought up, it's the Michael stuff. But that just doesn't work for me as much.
Yeah.
I think you articulated it beautifully. It's a great prequel and an underwhelming sequel. At least that's how I feel.
I love the Fredo stuff. In some ways, I kind of wish he was the main character of the present day timeline of that movie, to sort of like look at Michael's deterioration and his de-evolution from a different person's perspective. I think that more interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I guess we don't have to get too much down.
We probably had a lot of listeners just turn the podcast off right now.
But my pick here is The Godfather Part 2. Okay, so, I understand that a lot of people love this film and would be mad at me if I chose not to take it there. So, Godfather Part 2 is my first pick here. All right.
Well, now it's your pick again, snaking back to you, right?
Back to me for the second round. And this is where there's just a plethora of riches here. I don't think we can go wrong here in the second or third rounds here.
Oh no.
I'm gonna go with another epic. I'm gonna go with there's two. I guess you can't go wrong either way. I'm gonna go with Return of the King.
Okay.
And primarily because I don't know if we're talking about how I would rank it, I don't know if I would pick it this high, although it's still pretty high for me. That's an incredible Best Picture winner.
Same.
There are other epics I would choose above it, but when you're looking at how this will go in a voting sense, there's a lot of love for Return of the King that I think will benefit me when it comes to the vote. So I'm going to go with Return of the King.
It will, but at the same time, I almost wanted to pose a question in our criteria. Should we nix Lord of the Rings? Because in some ways, this is like a 3-film pick, right?
It is. It's a little bit of a cheat.
Yeah. So you're going to get votes from those who simply love Fellowship of the Ring.
Who just love those movies.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. But at the same time, this was a Best Picture winner, so we have to include it.
Yeah, because
maybe I should have picked it first.
Because I think you will get Lord of the Ring fans in on that vote for sure.
Yeah,
and again, even if I wouldn't have it this high on my own personal, it would still be pretty high. Like if I was crafting my own top 10 Best Picture winners, I still think I make room for that somewhere. Even
I
if
might
it's not
too.
top 5 for me.
Yeah, I'd have to go through that exercise. I want to see more of the Best Picture winners that I haven't had a chance to see yet or are due for a rewatch before I go through that exercise. But yeah, most likely, I mean, between The Godfather and Return of the King that we're talking about, most likely they'll both follow my top 10. Godfather will, especially.
For sure, I agree.
Return of the King, at the very least, is top 20.
Yeah, Godfather is a top 5 movie of me of all time. Like that's on my all-time list, let alone this list.
Yeah. It's top 5 in my favorite Best Picture winners for sure. I think that's a safe bet to say.
Yeah. Okay, so Return of the King is my my second pick here. So back to you for your number.
Back to you, snaking back to me. This is really where it starts to get kind of tricky, right? Because I feel like we have like 20 films left that are almost like equally weighted in some way. At least they have their own fan bases.
Yeah, they do.
That it's like, where do you go? The strategy here is so unclear.
It's almost like you can't do too much wrong here.
but at the same time, you kind of can. That's the dangerous thing. Yeah,
you have to pick which films you think have the biggest fan base or the most vocal anyway that would be passionate about this when it comes to the vote.
All right, I've got my list here. I've got it on my phone, so I'm going old school here. I think I know what 2 I'm going to go with next. My next one, I'm going to go No Country for Old Men.
Ooh, okay, that's going higher than I anticipated here.
Okay,
but I understand the reasoning.
Well, part of the reasoning, too, I think, is just sort of how the Coen brothers are a bit top of mind now, because there was this recent article that they're getting back together to do a horror film.
Yes.
In some ways, I guess I'm speaking to the timing of the Coen brothers as opposed to the movie itself that I'm picking, even though I do think most people would agree it is one of the better Best Picture winners we've ever seen, especially of this century, right?
Yes.
And the fact that it was one of the best films of 2007, the greatest cinematic year of our lifetime, arguably, is even more emblematic of how great this movie is. And it's not even my favorite Coen brothers film. Like if I were to rank my favorite Coen brothers films, this would be top 5, but it's not my favorite. I prefer Fargo and Inside Llewyn Davis, and in some ways I sometimes prefer Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Depending on what my mood is. I love it so much.
Me too,
yeah. But No Country for Old Men, I think, is in some ways kind of this blueprint for what the modern Western can look like.
Yeah.
Even though it takes place in Texas, and I mean, you can kind of argue the semantics of that all, but stylistically, as far as it being a genre film, it is kind of what the modern Western is. And I think it handles that really well. I love the ambiguity of it. It's a very strange Best Picture winner because it was one of the few times I feel like we saw a movie win Best Picture that was really trying to challenge the audience thematically, right? I can't remember the last time a movie ended so opaquely and frustrated people in the process. Yeah, and bleakly too. I mean, to certain audiences who were expecting a climax would probably walk out of that movie thinking they didn't see the climax. Like it kind of has that feeling to it, and I love that about it.
I think what's so great about 2007 in that regard is that whether they went with No Country or There Will Be Blood, both of those have an ending that just leaves you jaw dropped and on this incredible moment of bleakness. Like, and it's like those two films winning Best Picture, it just feels so anti-Oscars in some ways, especially when you look at some of these winners. You're like, holy cow, those two movies are such a far cry from some of the winners that have won this award previously.
Yeah.
You know, or you think about even some of the films that won after those two films, like I feel like No Country, There Will Be Blood belong more in the modern era of the Academy, the 2016 to now era. You know, they've evolved. Like those two films feel like they should be now.
And you know, it's funny, they were the front runners, weren't they? Like that year, they were kind of the front runners. So they kind of maybe they kind of inspired this new movement of Academy voting.
They might have, yeah.
So that makes them even more special. Like I feel like we'd be saying the same thing about the legacy of No Country for Old Men as we would There Will Be Blood if There Will Be Blood was the one that won Best Picture.
Yeah.
I feel like if either film won, they would be leaving the similar this kind of similar blueprint. And I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. Now, I mean, it does come off the heels, to be fair to the Academy of that time. It comes off the heels of The Departed, which also has like a weird ending that's similar tonally a little bit.
Yeah, but not so much thematic. That movie's obvious, though, thematically speaking.
For sure. But then you think about, okay, so some of the films that won immediately afterwards is Slumdog Millionaire, The King's Speech, The Artist. Yep. It's like, okay. Like
normally we try
not Locker in there as well, but
normally we try not to say movie titles as to not play our cards too early in drafts like this, but you just mentioned mostly titles that I don't think are going to be selected in this list.
No, spoiler alert, they probably will not, but like in the context of this conversation, I just think it's interesting that you have No Country and of course There Will Be Blood very much in that conversation.
Yeah.
Like it just feels like of the Academy of yesteryear, like Juno should have won that, or maybe a Michael Clayton, like for No Country to win.
Yeah, even something like Atonement doesn't really have the same tonal comparisons to some of its predecessors, right? Like that movie has a bleakness to it and a really strange narrative structure that distances itself from other romantic epics that would have won this award in the past.
Yeah, there was like some viral tweet recently about like some tweet asking like what are some of the best women villain characters in film, and someone said Saoirse Ronan from that movie.
That's actually a really great pick. My first
I was like, man, that's inspired. Like that's an inspired choice.
My first thought was Kate Beckinsale from Love and Friendship.
But
yes, Saoirse Ronan from Atonement. That is a great answer to that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, 2007, great year. Again, don't have to get too much stuck on that. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that to me, those three films, if we want to include Atonement there, they just feel like a now Academy pick versus 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, so snaking back to me for my number 3 pick here. Yep. I guess we'll keep with the epics, and I mean, all these films we pick are going to be speaking to our cinephile circle in some way, but I know we have a lot of listeners and companions of the InSession Film Podcast and just InSession Film in general that not only love this film, but I know some people who say this is the greatest movie ever made. I'm going with Lawrence of Arabia next.
Okay, yeah, that was the other one I was considering alongside Return of the King.
Yeah, well, I mean, it sits nicely with Return of the King, right? Like, if you pick those two instead of Godfather Part 2 first, I actually wouldn't have blamed you because they actually do fit nicely next to each other. And while the Return of the King is sort of seen as this blockbuster epic nowadays, it has more in common with something like Lawrence of Arabia. That's what makes the Lord of the Rings films so great, was that Peter Jackson was looking back to an era of filmmaking that wasn't necessarily all about blockbuster filmmaking. They were just big and epic and grand and vast and colorful. And what's so awesome about Lawrence of Arabia, you watch it now, you could really sense the influence that it left on Spielberg, for instance, on Peter Jackson. We talked about that, on many films by, let's say, Mel Gibson or Ridley Scott. Like you could see all of that. The way that Peter O'Toole as Lawrence himself is introduced is so similar to Indiana Jones. It's the blueprint of what blockbuster filmmaking would become, especially in the adventure subgenre specifically. It all started with Lawrence of Arabia in 1962 and what David Lean was doing there. It's so interesting how he would go from directing something like Brief Encounter to then this.
Yeah.
I mean, many years later, but still, it's apples and oranges. It's so incredible. But I do think this is perhaps one of the best epics ever made, and I think it also has the greatest intermission of any movie like this, because it really is a tale of two halves, and it tells a completely different half by the end of this movie, which is so fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree now that I've seen it twice because
Nice.
I was always underwhelmed by this, at least on that first viewing, and I don't know why. Because I'm an idiot, that's why.
You know what?
But
Okay, I'll be nice to you. I'll be nice to you about this. It is a movie you have to be willing to submit yourself to.
yeah,
And you have to be in the right mindset, and you have to be willing to set time aside to dedicate to it. And if you find yourself distracted, it's not the time to watch this movie.
yeah, I agree. No, I agree. And yeah, for whatever reason, maybe it was the distraction of it. But that first time I just didn't love it. But then I went back and rewatched the film. I don't know, a year and a half ago. I can't remember. But I went back and revisited the film and did a completely 180 on it.
Good.
And man, it's an incredible film, incredible movie. That I absolutely love it as well. I mean, the cinematography on it alone is just mind-boggling. It's just a remarkable film visually, and I think the character work and the themes underneath are all fantastic. So yeah, it's a film I love.
Tricky.
I would make room for it on my own personal top 10 of this list, and as I noted earlier, it was, if you didn't select it there, it was going to be one of my next picks as well.
Okay, well, I'm glad I stole it.
All right, so the next film I'm going to choose here, I don't know where I would rank this on my own personal top 10 Best Picture winners, but we did throw out a tweet last week asking everyone for their top 5 Best Picture winners. I wanted to gauge where everyone else was. I wanted to see, you know, get the feelers out there. There was a film that I saw constantly in people's top 5.
Look at you getting voice of the customer here.
So I'm going to use that homework as evidence for my next pick here, even if it's not in my own top 5. Again, I don't know. I haven't done the exercise either, like Brendan. But this film was represented a lot, so I'm going to take it. It is Casablanca.
That's a great film. I was almost ready to take it next.
So yeah, I mean, it is a great movie for sure. I just don't know where it would rank on this list because we're talking about a lot of great movies. But yeah, this is an incredible movie. The set design of it all, the production value, it's remarkably cinematic. I love how charming it is. There's a radiance to it. The romanticism between Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman is iconic.
Yeah.
The storytelling is efficient, very, very efficient and compelling, leads to one of the best final scenes of all time. And of course, thematically, there's a lot there about politics and relationships and idealism that still hold a lot of weight today.
It's very ahead of its time. I agree with you.
Very ahead of its time for sure. So I love it. Plus, you also get "Here's Looking at You, Kid," one of the most famous lines.
Oh, it's an iconic script. It's one of the best scripts of this era for sure.
No doubt about
any
it.
era, really.
No doubt about it. So yeah, I had to go Casablanca here.
Yeah, you know, I'm with you as far as not knowing where it ranks in my personal ranking of Best Picture winners. It's entirely possible this wouldn't be top 10 for me, and I think it's because I saw it a little bit later than some of these other ones, so I don't quite have the same, I guess, passion for it, but I do think it is certainly one of the best. It is an amazing movie and easy one to rewatch. You know, it has some complexities to it, but it's not like you have to sit back and watch Lawrence of Arabia again. You know, it's not quite the 3.5 hour epic, but yeah, there's a real tender quality to it, especially from the romantic side that I do really appreciate.
Yeah, really great. For my next pick, I have to open up with an apology.
To me or to who?
To you.
Oh, why? You knew I was going to take this one or something?
Well, it's not. Well, yes. I mean, obviously, I knew it was going to be on your list. I wasn't sure how it was going to fall. However, we're at the point here in the draft where I don't think I could get this in the next round. And I think, like Casablanca, I saw this quite a bit. I saw this a lot, that I don't want to risk losing it And I think some of these others that I have my eye on, I can get later on. So because of how it just worked mechanically here, I'm going to have to go with Amadeus here for my
I knew that's when you were talking about. And I'm mad at you for that because I had a very specific reason.
You are.
No,
that's why I have to apologize.
I had a very specific reason for being mad at you. I'll let you go ahead first before I get to my next picks.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can certainly let you talk about it. I mean, I know that this is one of your favorite Best Picture winners of all time, maybe one of your favorites of all time.
Well, I can talk about it, but yeah, you go first because it's your pick, and then I'll bounce off that.
Well, I mean, I'll just say because I didn't get a chance to see this until last year. I mean, how many times have we joked about this on the show in previous years? Because you would bring this up. Several. I feel like this has made your top 3 at least
quite a bit,
4 or 5 different times.
Quite a bit, yeah. I've had the penalty box
top 5 lists over the years, and I just never got a chance to see it. Every single time you brought it up, my only response was, "Well, one day I'll
see it one day." Yeah,
and then it was sometime last year, I think, in the summertime. I can't really recall, but I did go back and visit it for the first time last year. And yeah, you weren't wrong. It was a lot of fun. And I don't know why, because again, you've talked about this, but there's something about just hearing you talk about it and having a level of expectation, but then just going in and experiencing it on its own terms that still surprise me. Like
that's the thing.
The
it's a movie
of tones. I don't know if anything can prepare you for it.
Well, I think that's a great point. It's a movie that is beyond explanation. I've talked about it a lot. I've set you up for it, and yet I really set you up for none of it by doing it. And I didn't do that deliberately. It's because of how varying in tone that the film is, as you're saying. It's what is so masterful about it and how it brings all those things together so seamlessly.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's hilarious. It is such a funny movie. And I love how it does, I guess, subvert expectations, because in some ways, at least if you just simply read about what this movie is, it seems like it's going to be this movie about these two heated rivals. And in some ways it is that, but not to what you think it would be dramatically.
Yeah.
And there's certainly a level of drama eventually, but like it's how the film builds to its climax. And also you kind of get this backstory as well throughout the whole film, like this narration that I think is an added element that is also funny at times and adds some interesting context. And there's a lot here that is
F. Murray Abraham and that performance.
So
wow.
Good.
Wow.
So good. Yeah, I loved it. I fell in love with it. I understand where Brendan is coming from. So again, like I didn't aim to steal this from you.
No,
but I didn't think I could get it in the next round.
Well, you wouldn't have gotten it in the next round because, like I said, there was a really specific reason why I was hoping to get it next. And it was so I have 2 picks now, right? Okay, I'm getting to my number 4, my number 5 picks. It is so rare to have 2 Best Picture winners that are so highly regarded like this being from the same director.
Yeah.
Milos Forman, right?
Yeah.
And I was trying to go for a twofer with my next pick.
You gotta get both of them.
I was trying to get both of them, but you went with Amadeus, so that at least reveals what my next pick is, and I'm going with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Okay, there you go.
Which, this was one of the first Best Picture winners I remember seeing, knowing it as a quote-unquote Best Picture winner, and it's because I saw it back in high school as I read the original novel it's based on by Ken Kesey, which is actually one of my favorite novels, and it is not the most faithful of adaptations. It mostly is, but it's also not. So I guess in some ways, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is kind of why I tend to argue how much I appreciate unfaithful adaptations as opposed to just mirror copies of the source material. Because this is a movie, Milos Forman, what he's doing, performatively from Jack Nicholson and many others. Like it takes a little bit more liberties. And I actually think nowadays you watch the movie and you kind of look at it through a modern lens and you realize there are a lot more complicated and complex things that the movie is getting at as far as how people are treated and who the real culprit is. Because when One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out, we looked at Louise Fletcher and her performance as Nurse Ratched as a villain, right?
Yeah. There's a whole show about it now.
Yeah. Well, it's been canceled now.
Yeah.
But here's my question. Is she though? Is she like R.P. McMurphy, Jack Nicholson's character, is kind of a really bad troublemaker. The movie is actually way more complex than I think we give it credit for nowadays, especially when it won Best Picture, because even Louise Fletcher, when she won the Oscar for that performance, I think first thanked everyone who saw the movie by saying, "I'm so glad you hated me so much." That was kind of part of the character, and that's how people perceived her. But nowadays, I think it's a really complicated movie about what it means to maintain order in an ethical way. So for a lot of reasons like that, I think it actually is held up even more nowadays. And I do think it's a very great movie. So
do you think that film, because I feel like I've seen this a little bit, not that movies from 1975 are as seen in the discourse as the most recent crop of Best Picture nominees. But I do think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has a little bit of that La La Land thing to it because it won over Barry Lyndon, Dog Day Afternoon, Jaws, and Nashville.
Oh, and that is such a great lineup.
It's such an incredible lineup. And I could understand why people might look at that list and go, okay, yeah, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is 5th on that list for me. And I feel like it is for a lot of people. So because it won, again, turning art into sports. I don't know if we should do it, but here we are.
Yeah. And there are, it's competing with some of the greatest movies ever made, right?
Exactly.
Man, that's like 2007 all over again, isn't it?
It is. And so that is a strong crop of nominees there.
Yeah.
And while Cuckoo's Nest wouldn't be my vote among those 5, I don't think it's a bad film at all. But I think it does have a weird reputation because it won the award. Again, we go back to that. The best thing that ever happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture.
That it lost.
Maybe we should make a T-shirt. The worst thing that ever happened to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is that it won Best Picture.
I think you're onto something because at least, and again, this is a very selective market that I'm basing this on, so I have no objectivity here. But when I look at those who I follow on, let's say, Letterboxd, for instance, I do feel like there is this reevaluation for the film with that mindset that you're talking about, that there is this, okay, just because it won Best Picture, does that mean it is the lesser film of this crop because of what it had to compete with? It's like when we look back at some of Spielberg's films that we deemed as emotionally safe and obvious and only realize later on, oh, these are actually really complicated movies.
Yeah.
And I feel like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is falling into a similar category nowadays.
Okay.
And that's why I'm picking it. And hopefully it works out in my favor. I don't know.
That's why I wanted to ask, because I've seen the sentiment on Cuckoo's Nest in that regard, which is why it wasn't necessarily high on my list, regardless of how I feel about it. But maybe you've seen more to push you to picking it that high. That's why I was curious, genuinely.
I think it has a more selective fan base, but it has a very vocal fan base.
Okay.
And that's what I've noticed. So whether that helps me or not, I should say this, I don't know if it's going to hurt me. It depends on how the rest of our lists shape up, I guess.
Mean, you're going to end up having a great crop of debt.
We both are. But we have to be splitting hairs based on how good that crop is, right?
Exactly, and that's why I wanted to ask, because if it does come down to splitting hairs, could that be it? I don't know. I'm posing it as a question, but
yeah,
maybe you've seen more than I have. That's why I wanted to ask.
I've seen quite a few. I've seen quite a few positive thoughts for it. Is it enough to give me the victory? We'll see. We'll see. Now, I know my next film that I'm going to pick here won't be one that I get a finger point at saying, how dare you pick this one? I'm going with The Silence of the Lambs next.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You talk about a filmmaker that has a massive range, right? We just got done talking about the great Philip Seymour Hoffman as an actor's range is concerned, but wow, Jonathan Demme. No Jonathan Demme film was like the other. And you look at his 80s films, no one would have thought someone like him, the director of Stop Making Sense and Something Wild, among others, would direct one of the most horrific serial killer movies ever made. And on top of that, it's not even just that. It's a very complex look at a woman in a man's world and trying to overcome that. And I think just from those merits alone, and Jodie Foster's amazing performance, there's a lot that is aged so well about this movie, and I think will continue to age well. It's still a thrilling experience. If you've never seen this movie and you watch it for the first time, it feels like a modern film, like it could have come out today. And that's what's so great about it. So don't have to say much more about it. I think most people would agree with this pick.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick. We reviewed this a few years ago. I can't remember when or what the context was, but I do remember us having a conversation about it and watching the film again leading up to that review. Still as bone chilling now as I'm sure it was in the early 90s when it came out. So,
and I know a lot of people reference the like the first meet between Clarice and Hannibal or the ending night vision scene. It's always been the prison escape scene for me. That has always been the most frightening scene in the whole movie for me.
Yeah. Yeah, really great stuff. Yeah, you'll get no pushback for those two.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to me for my next pick here. And this is where I feel like when trying to wrestle with the films that I wanted to have on my list, we're now at that middle ground where there's like 20 movies that you could choose from here and trying to get the best ones. This is where it gets a little trickier, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to stick with the 90s. I'm going with Goat Cameron. Titanic.
Oh.
I'm going to go with Titanic. Another epic.
Okay.
He's the GOAT for a reason. And
not sure I expected it this soon, but okay.
There's a lot of love for Mr. Cameron. Maybe this is a little top of mind, a little recency biased here. I don't know. Because not only do you have Avatar: The Way of Water that came out recently, but Titanic got that re-release in the theaters as well. And so there's been a resurgence with that film, talking about it more.
Yeah.
And I think it's just one that people are falling in love with again. And that's been indicative on Letterboxd. It's been on indicative on social media, particularly on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I am going to go with Titanic. I think there's some momentum with that film because of recent happenings.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I actually think it's one of James Cameron's better movies. And when I say better, I mean, like, if I were to rank all of his movies, this is top 3 for me. Might even be my number 2 in some days.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's great. I love it. So it depends on the kind of crowd that does vote. Maybe they, to your point, might think it's a little high, but I think there's a lot. I think there is genuinely some momentum right now with this movie. And Cameron,
I think certainly with Cameron for sure. But I think there is sort of like with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, there is this recognition that, just because it is what it is, does that mean we should shrug it off? In the case of Titanic, just because it's a true story depicting a Romeo and Juliet like romance, does that mean we should shake it off? No, it's way more, I don't want to say complicated, but there's a lot more happening than just that. And given what it is so good at doing what it's doing. That should be recognized.
For sure. So I'm going to go with Titanic. And in the spirit of momentum, I'm going to go with a film that certainly had a lot of it when it won. And it's also ironic coming off the heels of the conversation we had last week, and I invoked it there a moment ago as well, regarding this whole thing of turning art into sports.
Dang it, I wanted to take this one next.
So we've turned art into sports quite a lot. There is one moment in recent years where we as a society collectively decided, you know what? We're going to all agree on this. There's no pushback. We all agree this is the best picture of the year. we're all going to be passionate about it, and we're all going to celebrate it accordingly. And we did. And that was Parasite.
When will that ever happen again?
I don't know. I don't think that will ever happen again. Certainly not going to happen this year. But yeah, we all at the same time decided we're going to drop this whole sports thing, and we're all going to. Could you imagine if that happened? We're all Chiefs fans. Everybody is Chiefs fans. No, that's not going to happen. Not going to happen.
No, not happening.
And that doesn't happen with art these days anyway either.
No.
So, but it did with Parasite, and that's a moment that will stand the test of time for sure. So, with that in mind, I'm going with Parasite.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to go with that one next, or at least one of my next two that I have on the docket, because you're right. As far as trying to garner votes out of this draft, I don't know of anyone that dislikes this movie, or at least doesn't think of it as one of the better movies of 2019 when it came out. Of course, it's set a record. First Best Picture winner to be in another language.
Yeah,
in a non-English speaking film to win this award. And also the first ever representation like this for South Korea. So a lot of records being broken by just this movie simply existing, right?
Just crazy.
Yeah. And I love your notion about, for once, not turning this into a sports ceremony.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm going to completely derail this conversation and pick Moonlight next for my pick.
There you go. That's a good one. Yeah. There you go. Let's go ahead and get the most quintessential art in a sports story there is.
Yeah. But it has fans.
It
deserves its fans. And
that's the thing. Like, we joke, we laugh about it, the best thing that ever happened, the La La Land thing. But the thing about that is that comes about because the fans for Moonlight were so passionate and they were extremely vocal that to even mention La La Land was almost a death sentence, it felt like at the time.
Yeah.
And it was, and I understand because Moonlight is a really great film. It was deserving of being Best Picture, but La La Land, of course, had all of this momentum. And here's the thing. I think most, if not all, La La Land fans, even if they wanted it to win Best Picture, I think do recognize the greatness of Moonlight.
Well, how can you not? It's such a perfectly constructed movie. It's like,
I agree. Yeah. Like I feel like, and this might be completely myopic of me to say, and I'm willing to admit that, but it felt like that negativity was a one-way street, or at least more of a one-way street. Where now, because it won, it felt like all of that has dissolved mostly. I feel like we can talk about both films in a positive light without this heated debate around it.
Yeah. I think we can too. It was deserving. And I understand the passion for that sports mentality between those two films, but I do think it's kind of understood because in many ways, Moonlight was a very important film and a very important kind of film to win Best Picture in a sort of similar way to Parasite, not given the semantics of it all or the record-breaking aspect of it. But Moonlight really represented like sort of this new curve, if you will, of representation in cinema, right? And how that could be rewarded. Like we were seeing that a lot, especially in the 2010s. There was like this new wave of what representation meant in Hollywood. And Moonlight was and continues to be kind of the premier blueprint of that. And like when movies come out nowadays that want to do similar things, and they should, Moonlight's always going to seem like an influence, right? Like that DNA is all over this type of movement.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really interesting wave of films that sort of became part of like this Moonlight mentality. If that's not a band name, I don't know what is. But yeah, it's like but I think just ignoring what impact it made, I still think of its kind, it's a pretty perfectly constructed movie. And a very interestingly constructed movie, given its three narratives that take place at different timelines and how this one character is played by three different actors and how it all seems so of a piece with each other. So yeah, I do think it's a beautiful movie, and I think you need to have it on some list here, given the topic at hand.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Great pick.
Yeah. All right. So then I have one more, right? Before it snakes back over to you.
Yes.
And I don't know where to go next. Man, this is where it gets hard, right? This is where it gets really, really difficult. I feel like I can flip like a 30-sided coin next, and I could be okay with whatever ends up, on the receiving end of that. I think I am. I wasn't going to do it this early, but I'm going to. And this might get me in. Actually, you know what? Maybe I won't go. I'm second guessing myself live in the middle of this. I'm probably making our listeners really frustrated and really annoyed. Actually, okay, I'm changing my tune. I'm not doing it that early. I'll save that for later if I get the chance to. I'm going to go Unforgiven next.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. All right, good one.
Yeah, and this is kind of a dual pick for me because on one hand, I do think it is one of the best picture winners, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. This is also one that is in my top 5 personal favorites. I think this is Clint Eastwood. Yeah. I think this is Eastwood's best movie. Between this and Letters from Iwo Jima, I think are his 2 best achievements as a director. And similar to what we talked about with Moonlight, or what I was just talking about there, and how it sort of created this new wave of what you can do with cinema, in that case being about representation. Unforgiven completely reinvented the Western genre. So like it added a grit to it. It didn't add a level of, I guess, joy and murderous fun that some of these movies used to have. It actually had that. It actually seemed to suggest that what Eastwood used to do in his spaghetti westerns was actually a psychologically devastating thing. So it kind of became this almost meta component on what actors had to go through in those kind of genre films. And Unforgiven comes around and completely flips it on its head. And on top of that, you have some of the greatest actors of all time all in one movie, like Richard Harris, Clint Eastwood, obviously, Morgan Freeman, Gene Hackman, perhaps the greatest living actor of all time in some ways,
sure.
All delivering such great work. And as a deconstructionist film, as a film that doesn't really have a clear villain or hero, it's basically a movie of anti-heroes in many ways. I think it's a very complicated movie. One of the most nuanced Best Picture winners of its time, for sure. At least thematically and emotionally speaking. You never really know whose side you should be on, and I love how it questions that. So, yeah, Unforgiven. Beautiful film, great film, beautiful looking film, beautiful scored film. It's got all of the ingredients to make a masterpiece.
Nope, I completely agree. I think it's a great movie. Could be Eastwood's best directed movie. It might be for me. I don't know, though. To your point, there's certainly a few to consider there.
I mean, that early to mid 2000s era of Clint Eastwood was kind of untouchable.
It was pretty elite. Yeah,
I'd say like from Mystic River onward through to like Letters from Iwo Jima. Heck, I mean, some people would say Gran Torino. I actually really like Changeling more than most. That era was untouchable.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, yeah, it was definitely one of the next films I wanted to go to here.
Gotcha.
Because it's a film I also love. Probably would be in a 10 for me. I don't know if it would be my 5, but probably on a 10 for me. If we were doing our own top 10 here.
Yeah, gotcha.
I love it. Yeah. Okay. The next 2 for me, I'm going to go with a couple of classics here for my next 2. And similarly to what I noted about Casablanca and Amadeus, when we threw out the question on Twitter, boy, did we get a lot of responses for these. I love these movies. Like I would certainly consider them even on my own list for sure. If we were having a broad conversation, I think these should be in the conversation for some of the best picture winners we've had. But also, again, riding the wave of the conversation on social media. The first one I'm going to go with is 1950s All About Eve.
Interesting. Okay. Good choice. Good choice.
I really like this film as well. I don't know if this would be on my personal 10. It's in the conversation, but I saw a lot of comments for this.
I need to see it again. That's my thing.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw this was, I don't know, 2015 or 16. It's been a few years for me as well.
That's basically a decade when you think about it.
It is. Yeah, but I mean, I do love it. I think it's really great, a remarkable achievement. The performances are really fantastic. I wish I would have had a chance to see it again before coming into this conversation. And if so, that might have determined whether I went higher on this or not.
Right.
I don't know. But this was pretty high on my list because, again, of the homework of, we threw this out there and this was on a lot of people's top 5, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is, there is a rabid fan base for this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to go with it here for my next selection. And then I'm going to follow that up with a film that I caught up with in 2020, and that is The Apartment.
What a movie. I love
Billy
this
Wilder?
movie so much. Yeah.
Absolutely adore this movie. Its commentary and depiction of toxic masculinity is apparent and remarkable. It takes this rather dark and unexpected turn halfway through the film.
It's like this situational comedy until all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's just not.
Exactly. Like, I just love the boldness of that in Wilder's storytelling here. And Shirley MacLaine gives this entrancing performance that I really love. Like, it's stunningly textured and just so magnetic. And I love what it's saying. I think it's a film that holds up immensely well today, and is just a great Best Picture winner of its era and really of all time. So the Apartment is one that would be on my personal top 10.
Probably for me as well.
Yeah,
that one. When all of a sudden it is no longer a romantic comedy and it becomes something else entirely. For a moment, it almost becomes like this Linklater-esque Before Sunrise kind of thing between Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine, and just watching them talk in that apartment. Like, I could have gotten 3 hours of that and would have been so happy.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, like, given the premise of the film and what it's saying, there is something about that jarring tone that just, it's like this punch to the face that feels so appropriate. And it's a trick that's really hard to pull off because those sort of tonal transitions, not every director can do it seamlessly.
Right.
And Wilder somehow manages that immaculately, and not just in terms of the cinematic experience of it, but again, how that complements what that film is even talking about. I think it's incredible. Like, it's so good. So that's a masterpiece of a movie.
It really is. It really is. I kind of wanted to take it next because I think I need more quote unquote classics from before the 1970s on my list. I mean, I do have Lawrence of Arabia. So yeah, but it's like, I'm looking at my list here and there's so much to do yet. There's so much to go through. I don't know what to do now. Yeah, because it's snaking back to me because then you've got 2 more and then I've got 1 more to do my last pick.
And there's I know, and the thing is like there's I'm also torn now between subjective and where I think the votes will go. Because
I'm still trying to go where the votes are going.
I mean, mostly that's where I am as well. But when it gets to those last 2, there's a little bit of me that wants to throw in a little bone for myself, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right. For my next pick, I'm going to go with this one only because I recently rewatched it. So it's very top of mind for me. Who knows if it's actually going to get me votes?
Birdman. Oh, I don't blame you.
Oh, yeah, Birdman. Yeah. Sadly, not picking Birdman. Although I do like that movie.
I do too.
I'm going to go The French Connection.
That's a good one. That's a good pick.
Yeah. Recently rewatched this, and one of the things I latched onto more this time around, kind of watching it through the eyes of director William Friedkin and what he would be known for as time would go on, because he is not afraid to speak his mind, and his movies are provocative, right?
Yep.
And on the surface, you might see The French Connection as kind of this basic crime drug thriller of sorts. And I hate to use the word basic because that is certainly underselling the greatness of this movie. What really got to me rewatching it now was the writing. the script writing here, and I do want to, I'm blanking on the source material and who the writer is, so I just want to give credit where credit is due. Ernest Tidyman, based on the work by Robin Moore. So I want to give credit there because from a script writing standpoint, this movie is nasty. It is so mean. The amount of slurs uttered in this movie. I was astounded that this came out in the early 70s. So for those reasons, I think this movie kind of has an edge for just simply being very ahead of the curve in what you can get away with in the American new wave of cinema, right? In many ways, like I watch this movie and I think, man, like whether he admits it or not, I could see a lot of Scorsese's Taxi Driver in this movie. Not just in the grit and the overall grime of it, but just like the nihilism of it. Like, it is such a mean movie where I don't really care for any character in it, and that's what's so fascinating about it. Like it's just got this grit that no other movie has. So for those reasons, I at least wanted to acknowledge it, whether it ended up on someone's list or not. But at this point, I think it needs to be represented here. It's a very strange Best Picture winner, not the kind of movie you associate a Best Picture winner with.
No. Yeah, it is a little weird on this list when you're looking through some of these and then you're like, the French Connection?
Yeah. It's like where'd that come from?
Yeah, it just feels like an oddball. Like, it's almost like when you go through the Criterion and you're like, Michael Bay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Armageddon? Actually, The Rock is also on Criterion, if I'm not mistaken, too, so that's kind of funny.
It's a little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so French Connection, that's my 8th pick. I've got 2 more here. I'll do my next one, then it'll snake back to you, and I might just have to flip a coin here. You know what? All right, this filmmaker is always top of mind, so maybe it'll help me out. I'm going to go Schindler's List.
Oh, okay, that's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, and admittedly, it's like, this is probably top 10 Spielberg for me, though admittedly, when it comes to, I really like it a lot, too. When it comes to some of his historical films, I tend to prefer movies like Catch Me If You Can, which might actually be my favorite historical Spielberg film. I might even slightly prefer The Fabelmans, if I'm being honest. Okay. Just given the fact that it is, about Spielberg in many ways. But like, this was Spielberg really perfecting that transition to adult filmmaker. And he's obviously done that a few times in the 80s with movies like The Color Purple and Empire of the Sun. But here with Schindler's List, he really perfected that formula and scared people with it. Like, you talk about movies that have a meanness to it. And Spielberg certainly has a passion for this story because as a Jewish man, he obviously wants to represent the truth here. This is a mean movie. This is a violent movie. I can rarely watch this one again. But there is a beauty to it, even despite its crushing length. So I think the fact that he was able to find such a middle ground between the brutality and the tender is a very hard, tricky thing to pull off. And I think the balance is just right. So Schindler's List, I think, is a great movie.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great one. I love that film as well. I'm not sure where it ranks for me on Spielberg, but it's certainly up there for me. I do love it quite a bit. So... with you there.
Cool. So you've got 2 more.
I got 2 more here. So again, I'm like you. I'm certainly going between there's like, I don't know, 10 films here or so where I could go in a number of ways. Okay, I think
I'm really intrigued as to where you're going to go from here because I have no idea.
I don't either, to be honest.
Well, hey, here's the bright side. You have at least 30 good films left.
Oh, for sure. Quite a
but that makes it harder, doesn't it?
Well, and also it's the gamesmanship of it, because if I was simply looking at my favorites, this is a little bit easier of a pick here.
For sure, yeah.
But then you're trying to consider, okay, which film will help me on the vote? That's what makes this a lot trickier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm gonna continue my mentality of some of these other picks. I think this is a really good movie as well. I'm gonna go with 1961's West Side Story.
Ooh.
So
okay.
again,
Actually, did not expect that. Okay, I'm kind of intrigued.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with West Side Story. Saw some, I think it's become quite clear for me that I much prefer Spielberg's movie.
Yeah, I know a lot of people would.
But I still really like this movie. I still think it's really great, and like I mentioned with Titanic and some of these others, and maybe it's because it's top of mind because of Spielberg's movie. People went back to revisit this one as well. But there's been some love for it, and so I saw this one quite a few times as well in the social media homework that we did. So
okay,
I'm gonna go with West Side Story.
Well, it's a very popular film for its time. It still continues to be.
Of course, to be. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so West Side Story, and then my next pick here, and what is this? This is, what are we on, 9, 8?
This is 10. This is your last film.
Oh, boy. Okay.
So we each have one more left.
Oh, boy. Oh, God. The pressure's on now.
Yeah, now I just scared you because you probably thought you had a few more to go through.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't realize we were at the end already.
Yeah, I've got your list in front of me, man. Yeah, West Side Story was your number 9. We're doing good on time. You want to extend this to a 12?
Okay.
No, it's more fun. Let's just do a 10.
Yeah. Okay, so again, what I'm struggling with here is the head and the heart, because there's a few on here that I think would help me in terms of voting. There's also 2 on my list I'm looking at where I want to pick for me that I think are good films, that I genuinely think are good films, but I don't know if it'll help me in the vote. I don't know.
It's the common problem of a movie critic.
Go here. You know what? Especially since I won the last 2, I'm just gonna roll the dice here. I'm gonna go with as I somewhat waffle on this because I'm still not sure. Okay, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go with 1934's "It Happened One Night."
Really? Okay. Yep. Okay. That I did not expect.
No. So I love this film. With my full soul and body. I think it's great.
Interesting.
It's really fun. It's really fun. And I think part of it is as well, like there's something about it that you can't help but romanticize when it comes to the Oscars, because movies like this, for one, don't really exist all that much these days.
That's 2, very true.
They are not winning awards. This film, as it is in 2023, is it nominated for an Oscar? I don't know. Maybe, probably not. And let alone winning Best Picture.
Yeah.
Like it obviously comes from a different era. I get that. And that's part of the romanticism, because this is a film that is a romantic comedy at its heart.
Sure.
It's remarkably charming. Earlier we talked about, some of the iconicness of these films, such as Casablanca. It Happened One Night is a film that is extremely iconic, but maybe in a more subtle way. Like there's elements from the film that people will absolutely recognize, even if they don't know it comes from that movie.
Yeah, Frank Capra, ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And it has some incredible, I love the writing here. But maybe more so than that, the performances at the center of this. Clark Gable is extremely captivating.
Oh,
like
yeah,
everything he does in this film is hilarious. Like he is so funny in this movie. It's a star making performance. Capital S star. Like, again, we just don't get those kind of performances in these kind of movies anymore. And sure, I mean, obviously, there's a lot from that era like this film isn't alone in that.
Right.
But when it comes to Best Picture winners, there are certainly fewer examples of it.
Right.
I mean, even among this list, there just aren't many that are just straight up romantic comedies.
That's true. That's true.
And
that's a very good point.
Now, it's early on in the Academy's history. So,
right.
There a lot more was up in the air at that time for sure. And at that time, I think they did have the 10 nominees, right, for Best Picture?
Something at the time, yes, I believe they did because, this was 1934, as you said. Yep. This had more than 10.
Yeah, there's a lot.
This had 12 nominees for Best Picture.
Yeah, so it wasn't until later on where they're like, we're going to make this 5 because this is getting out of hand.
I mean, this was the 7th annual Academy Awards that we're talking about.
Yeah, it was
back in the day, almost 100 years ago.
It was new. And so that's a part of it. And obviously, like, the cinematic landscape we're living in now is very different, but
sure.
I would love for a rom-com of this ilk to, one, be made more. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
But 2, also, like, be considered for awards. I think there's something about it that I love. So, and this is it's genuinely awesome. Oscars aside, I would just recommend people go and watch it if they've never seen it. It's great.
It's a great movie.
Head over heels in love with it.
Yeah, it's a charming film. And has a lot of interesting things on its mind for sure. Yeah, it's very rewatchable too. I do like this one.
And also, let me be clear, because I noted that I was going between my head and my heart, because I know this isn't going to help me in terms of the vote. I think this is genuinely one of the best on this list of all of these movies that.
And it's sad. It's sad if most people don't agree. Yeah.
And look, I get it that it's going to be underseen comparatively to some of these others. And there are some legendary films on here that we haven't even talked about. And maybe I'm curious if you name one of them for your last films, but like,
I don't know.
I don't know if they hold as much weight as they used to. Again, that could be a myopic comment for me to say. I don't know. But I think It Happened One Night is one of those films that you watch it, you're going to love it. You're going to romanticize it and wish for more of them. And
there's a universality to it.
There's a universality to it for sure.
Yeah.
But it's just genuinely one of the best on this list. It is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would go with it. I at the very least, it's one of the better ones. Yeah, I don't know if it would crack my personal top 10. But I think it would for me. Honestly, it's pretty close. It's pretty close. Yeah. It's certainly one of the more rewatchable ones for me, if I had to give it at least some credit.
There's definitely that.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's a very good film. So I at least agree with you from a subjective standpoint. So yeah, that means I have one film left, and I have. Okay, so there's at least 20 films I have listed here that I could almost go with. Some of them are a bit more subjective. They're a bit more me films that I personally love, but I'm not sure if they would help me out all that much as far as vote gathering. There's one that I really want to go with, but I don't think it's going to... We'll talk about it later when we get to our... I don't want to call them honorable mentions, but movies that just missed our draft. We'll talk about that at the end. Okay, I realize looking at my list, I need to cover more of a, I guess, like, time frame, if that makes sense, because I feel like, aside from Lawrence of Arabia, most of mine are all from, like, 1972 onward. So I feel like I need something pre-1970.
Yeah, like half my list is from pre-1970.
I know. So I need to at least acknowledge that I have seen and loved movies before 1970. It's not just Lawrence of Arabia. I'm going to go with On the Waterfront.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that was one of them I was heavily considering for sure.
Okay. And yeah, I do think this is a really good film from Elia Kazan, and really a lot of it comes down to this towering performance from Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
Between this and The Godfather, there's a reason why we sometimes use his name as kind of a verb when describing really great performances. Like
that was a
he went,
Brando performance.
yeah, he went full Brando there. It's he or she went full Brando. It's like that's how you know an actor is leaving some type of legacy behind. But I do think this is a really wonderful film with a good sense of grit to it. I love the blue collar mentality, which you don't often see in movies like this anymore. So it portrays a world that's it's urban without taking place in the city, if that makes sense, which is a very interesting kind of choice, a very interesting juxtaposition. And I think it makes the film seem even more kind of a one of a kind thing. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons I can go
some
into
iconic
why.
lines from this film too.
Absolutely, right, JD. You could have been a contender, right?
Could have been a contender.
Yeah, but I love a lot of the performances in this movie, not just from Marlon Brando, but Lee J. Cobb is great. Ava Marie Saint, especially, is fantastic here in a very early performance for her. So yeah, I think this is great. So hopefully this one helps me out.
Okay, I think it will. I mean, that's if I didn't pick It Happened One Night on the Waterfront was certainly maybe the one I was going to go to next. Okay. If not that, I mean, there's also Rocky is out there.
See, that's the one I almost went with. It was between On the Waterfront and Rocky. And I was only thinking Rocky given the topicality of Carl Weathers sadly passing. If that would help but then at the same time I thought of two things. The fact that it won Best Picture against Taxi Driver especially, would that hurt it? And two, am I only picking it to capitalize on Carl Weathers' death, and that makes me feel icky? So it's
fair.
So fair. I couldn't quite do that, even though I do recognize the film has left behind a very important legacy.
No, yeah, it's really quite great. I mentioned there's these two of I'd say the more recognizable, like two films that people at home, if you ask them about the films on this list that they'll know, Gone with the Wind, we didn't have on here.
Well, that's because we know who's going to be voting for us, and most people would say that movie hasn't aged very well.
Exactly, which is why I didn't pick for it. And I agree that's a huge distinction, right? Because we know who's voting on this. If this was like a true vote and America got to vote on this, I'm scooping that up top 3.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like you got to know your audience.
You got to know your audience for sure. And then I also thought about like The Sound of Music, and that was similar to, as I mentioned with some of these others, when I threw that out there on social media, that one was mentioned quite a bit.
Interesting.
And that's another big movie on this list, like a big recognizable name.
Yeah. I'm looking here. You mentioned Rocky. Almost thought about $1 Million Baby, which I think is a very underrated film. I mean, underrated as far as Best Picture winners are concerned. It's hard to call a Best Picture winner underrated, but I actually think that's one of Clint Eastwood's better films. There are some war films I thought about here. Instead of On the Waterfront, I almost went with All Quiet on the Western Front.
That's one of those. I mentioned earlier there were two heart picks for me. That one was the other one. It Happened One Night. All Quiet on the Western Front is the other one. And both of those would be on a personal top 10 for me. I think they're that good.
Okay. Interesting.
I think they're that good. I mean, and it's funny because like they're both like extremely different movies.
Oh, they are.
But
for sure.
There's something about like the pre-code era where, man, these filmmakers were really working on all cylinders. I mean, they were
that early on
able to create with a capital C. And All Quiet on the Western Front, man, that is. I love the remake that came out a few years ago, but that original film is as visceral. Like those war scenes are still incredibly gripping.
They are, considering when that came out, that's insane.
The editing, that's a great movie. So like both of those would be in my 10 for me. I think they're that good. Okay. I really do.
Yeah. But that's one I almost thought about. As far as other war films, almost thought about Platoon, Patton.
Okay.
Not really a war film, but another epic, Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
I'll say one of my very favorite Best Picture winners, and I didn't pick it because I don't think it's quite got the reputation that some of these other ones have, Midnight Cowboy.
That was one of my next films as well.
I love that movie so much. Absolutely adore it.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm with you, like, I don't know if it had the vote there, because
it feels kind of underseen by comparison, I think.
Yeah, and it might be because it wasn't mentioned nearly as much as some of these others.
Yeah.
But like, for example, I would take Midnight Cowboy over All About Eve, personally. For example,
I would too. I like that
West
movie
Side
more.
Story even.
Heck yeah, I would take it over many of the films in my own list that I just did here, as far as personally. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people probably wouldn't vote for it because they just don't know it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I thought about the Deer Hunter. I love that one, but similarly to Midnight Cowboy, I don't know if the vote was there. Maybe
that one. I mean, I like that movie. I don't love it. But I don't know if it has the same reputation that some of these other ones have. That's kind of the thing.
I think it has more of a reputation than a bunch of others that we haven't even called out yet.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that certainly has more of a reputation than, How Green Was My Valley, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at other ones here, like movies I do really quite like, Gladiator, Rebecca, 12 Years a Slave. Very recently, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which felt too recent to consider for this list at this point.
Yeah, those are the two other recent films aside from Parasite, and you mentioned Moonlight, which would have been obviously number 2 on this list.
But I feel like those films, you already can kind of tell the legacy they're leaving behind, which is why I think picking them makes more sense as opposed to something as recent as Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yes.
I think a fun question looking at this: are there any Best Picture winners that are sort of looked upon as among the worst that you actually think are pretty good?
That I think is pretty good. Like, as far as like would probably be lower on the list.
Well, like a movie, let's say for instance, like hypothetically speaking, what if you actually secretly liked Crash?
No, don't like.
I know you don't. But I'm saying, like, are there movies that maybe have a reputation as being, oh, that is one of the worst Best Picture winners, and you sit there and think, I think it's pretty good. I've got a few.
Mean, maybe. I guess my answer to this, and this is a little bit of this is tricky because of who's involved with it, and that would be Woody Allen's Annie Hall. Now, Annie Hall, if I'm able to separate the art from the artist, I think is absolutely incredible. 5 stars for me on Letterboxd. I love it. I think it's great.
Yeah, but I like it a lot too.
If we're going to include Woody Allen and his shenanigans, it becomes a lot more of a tricky conversation. So I didn't touch it. But that, to your question, I guess, is that considered a lesser film now because of Woody Allen? I don't know.
I don't know. I guess for some context, I was thinking of movies like at least ones for me, The Sting, for instance, which I actually think is a really fun movie. But it's kind of regarded as one of the lesser Best Picture winners. It's not seen as one of the best. And I'm not saying it should be seen as one of the best, but I do think the movie is better than its reputation suggests. And that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Maybe Marty. I don't know if Marty counts. The 1950.
I think that might maybe a bit more of a forgotten one. Yeah, I guess that counts.
I love that film. I think it's great. It has a great central performance from an actor that, normally didn't have those kind of roles.
Yeah. I think you and I like Forrest Gump more than most.
Yeah. I mean, I like it. It would be near the bottom of me of these films.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the film. It's not one of the best.
I enjoy it.
I don't think it's a terrible film.
I will say this, like, I probably have more films on the other side of that coin like films that are well regarded that I don't love as much, like a Rebecca, for example. I don't care for that.
Okay.
Obviously, we mentioned Gone with the Wind, if you want to consider that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, among our circles, there might be more of agreement, but broadly speaking, that's an iconic film that, and some of it might also stem from the year in which it came out. Because
yeah. I think timing.
I recently caught up with Stagecoach. Are you kidding me? That
Oh
film?
gosh,
that
John
was
Ford. Yeah.
Unbelievable. It is stupid how good that movie is. Like, it is unreal. That film had no right to be that great and that thrilling for 1939. That was
That's incredible. Yeah.
So, I probably have more of those.
Okay.
The Departed is obviously a big one on our circles as well. I definitely have quite a few here that I don't love as much. And obviously I'm very anti How Green Was My Valley.
No, I mean, yeah, because you're the Citizen Kane boy.
And that's that's where I have to be very careful not to become victim of my own
sports mentality.
Mentality.
I was gonna say, man.
But here's the thing. Like, I'm not anti. I was being a little facetious with that comment for sure.
It's like, geez, if Citizen Kane were your Detroit Red Wings, is How Green Was My Valley the Chicago Blackhawks?
Exactly. Like, I hate that movie. But here's the thing. I have seen How Green Was My Valley. So I think it is perfectly fine. Like, it's kind of like the coda of its year.
Gotcha.
Like, it's fine. Like, it's there's a lot to like about it. Like coda. I mean, it's hard. You'll watch it. There's the joy. There's charisma. I mean, there's heartache in that film. There's a lot that's going on with How Green Was My Valley, but
sure.
I mean, some of these others, and not just Kane, but some of these others on this list that it was up against, they're just miles better.
I wonder if we'd be able to do a top 10 draft of movies that should have won Best Picture that were nominated but didn't.
I think that would be. I would love to do that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe next week.
Yeah. Who knows? We shall see.
If there's no topic to cover, maybe we'll do that.
Yeah. Okay. So real quickly before we get out here, let's run down our list one more time.
All right.
Give me your 10.
All right. My 10. The Godfather, No Country for Old Men, Lawrence of Arabia, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Silence of the Lambs, Moonlight, Unforgiven, The French Connection, Schindler's List, and On the Waterfront.
Again, my 10, The Godfather Part 2, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, Casablanca, Amadeus, Titanic, Parasite, All About Eve, The Apartment, West Side Story, and It Happened One Night. So those are the 10. I also want to emphasize, because I feel like this has come up in the past as well. Voting on these 10, do not consider the order. There's no order to the 10. No order here. Just the 10. So regardless of how we drafted them, you don't have to put any stock or weight into that. Yeah. It's just the overall 10. Who has the best overall 10?
Yeah.
So,
in fact, maybe what you should do is alphabetize them when you post a list or something. I don't know.
Yeah, certainly could do that for sure. Yeah. But those are our 10 for each of us. Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our picks. We'll put out the poll on social media, so be on the lookout for that. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, you can just leave a comment below. Are you Team JD? Are you Team Brendan? Or Team We Both Screwed Up? Who knows? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'll probably get someone that says, you didn't pick The Departed. Both suck.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of movies that didn't get picked that I'm sure.
Yeah.
And we could have easily have gone to 15 or even 20 picks here. So
I know. Oh my gosh. What an exercise.
Good stuff here though. So yeah, definitely reach out to us. Let us know what you think of our picks. As we wind down here, just want to note that we do have some podcast reviews available from last week. If you want to go and check those out, we talked about Christian Petzold's A Fire.
Yep.
And the documentary Four Daughters. The Oscar-nominated documentary Four Daughters.
Yep, let's make that distinction.
So go and check that out. That was a lot of fun. We will have some reviews coming up this week. We are going to talk about Argyle. We just have to. And the reason we're going to do this is because we've seen the trailer a bajillion times, like you all have as well. And we are going to talk about this just so I can sleep at night knowing that we did not waste our time. I did not watch the trailer 1,000 times for nothing. Okay? So that's why we're going to talk about it.
So the movie exists. You were actually able to see it.
It exists. I've seen it. I know who the real Agent Argyle is.
I can't tell if that's an endorsement or not based on the way you're talking about that.
We shall see.
That's tricky.
So,
it's tricky. I have not seen the film yet. I still don't know who the Agent Argyle is that's in question. Yeah, this will be interesting. Yeah, so we'll at least have a review of that. I don't know if there's anything else on the docket review-wise. I do want to talk about The Promised Land whenever Brendan gets a chance to see that as well. There's that. I know apparently there's an animated movie on Netflix that's doing pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have to talk about that one. We can add that to the list. It's interesting because Brendan and I were coming up with some options a few weeks ago. This was not on my radar at all.
Yeah.
Orion and the Dark is the name of this animated film on Netflix, written by Charlie Kaufman. Yes, Charlie Kaufman.
That one, yeah.
And I watched it. Contender, spoiler alert, contender for best surprise movie of the year already.
Wow, interesting. Okay.
I really liked it a lot. I don't know if it'll end up being one of the best animated films of the year, maybe not. But as far as surprises go, this was not on my radar. It's a Netflix animated film, and those, there's like the history of those tend to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, that's fair.
And as much as I loved Nimona last year, I did not anticipate, and I didn't know that it was written by Charlie Kaufman until after I saw the film.
Did you notice it in the credits or something like that? Was it like, whoa? Because or did you have to look it up?
It's interesting because I watched the film and I'm like, this is really good and way different than I anticipated. Like the structure of the film, I'm really enjoying. Like I'm surprisingly very moved by this. And then afterwards I look it up and I see, I think I first went to Letterboxd and I saw, Charlie Kaufman wrote this. And immediately clicked. No wonder I enjoyed this movie. Of course, that's Charlie Kaufman. Of course, it makes so much sense.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So plenty to talk about there. I think. All right.
We'll add that to the list.
So maybe that'll be the other one then. At any rate, be on the lookout for all of that. Oh, be sure to check out Women in Session. Their latest episode is up. Was really fantastic. Talking about Christian Bale. And they'll have a new one this week. I don't know when it'll go out in relation to this episode, but they'll have a new one out this week as well. So you can check that out. And I think that is it. Of course, we have a bunch of reviews up on the website at InSessionFilm.com. If you want to support us on Patreon, we really, really do appreciate all of our patrons. We do got some new Patreon bonus content up right now that you can go and check out at patreon.com/InSessionFilm. So thank you to all of our patrons who support us. You guys mean the world to us. So thank you for your support. You can always email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun jazz. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, all that fun stuff.
Yep.
I believe that's it, Brendan. Am I missing anything?
I believe that's it. Our Patreon bonus content is finally up again because it's been a while since we've done that, right? It's been a while since we've done one, so we owed our patrons something great. And once again, patreon.com/InSessionFilm for some really, I don't want to say insightful, but from some loose content. Luckily, I did not get into the Grammys, the Grammy Awards that just aired last night. If you want to go and find insufferable discourse, look at the Grammy wins and just see what people are saying.
I did not watch the Grammys or partake in the discourse. I did see that Taylor Swift once again broke the internet. So there was that.
Yeah.
That's all that I caught up with.
That's part of the
It was a
discourse
busy-
that I don't want to get into.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, it was a busy weekend for me, so I did not get a chance to partake in that.
Yeah, lucky you.
I will say though, as my final thought before we get out of here, so as some of you know, I play hockey. I play beer league hockey.
Yeah.
And after having my second knee surgery about a year and a half ago now, I was able to start playing again back in October. Not playing goalie, but skating out. So it's been a little bit of a learning adjustment, playing forward instead of goalie. But I will say, in my last game, I had my best play yet. I was so proud of myself. Where I had dug the puck out of the corner, and had a nifty little pass to a teammate in the slot who ended up scoring a goal. So I got my first primary assist of the season.
Oh, nice!
And everyone was very surprised.
Well, congrats,
I was able
man.
to
Congrats. Yeah, you're
so
back up
in
and
fun
skating.
little moment. I'm like, okay, I can maybe kind of do this. I have a long way to go, but
You're
that
making
was my
strides.
fun-
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Yeah, my fun little baby step for the week, for sure.
Nice. Good job, man. Good job. I'm proud of you.
Speaking of baby steps, the baby is very close to standing up.
He's stepping?
Yeah, he's almost on his way to standing up. He almost did the other night, and
Oh, wow.
it won't be long before he's walking. I'd give it another 2 weeks.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible.
It's very exciting around these parts. So,
All right. Yeah.
at any
babies.
rate, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Oh, the Oscars. Some are great, some are not so great.
Sports.